Hello, eRank. Welcome to another Thursday live Q&A, and it's an extra special one. So that's with me, Pam Duffy, her Starla, but more importantly, we have Kristina joining us.
Hey guys.
Yeah, guys. Kristina Nicole is going to be hanging out with us for 1 hour. And questions today, we're going to be kind of going off the rails. Normally, our questions are mostly oriented around SEO. But what I keep telling people is, I don't care how good your SEO is. You could be in first page of Etsy. You could be like right when you log into Etsy, your listing could be right there. But if your thumbnail is crappy, nobody is going to click on that listing, regardless of how good your SEO is. So I dare say that your product photos are more important than your SEO is.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, I keep trying to tell people that the same thing and their eyes glaze over, but it's one of the number one most important things because people can't touch your items, so they need to see them. So thankfully we have an expert to teach us how to take good photos.
Yeah.
So
now,
get your questions in to our resident expert. You've only got her for an hour.
Now, we did have quite a few early bird questions to get through, but Kristina, did you want to introduce yourself for those who are unfamiliar with who you are and what you do? Because I dare say that your case as a, photography coach, I've never seen somebody who specifically focuses on product photography for creative businesses like Etsy sellers.
Yeah, I have a couple competitors out there, but I like to say that I am unique in the sense that I am actually a maker myself, and that's rare to find. So I've been a photographer since I was 17. That was when I got my first camera. I love photography. I've done portrait, family, infant photography. I started my product-based business on Etsy in 2015 and was wildly successful, and it just wasn't serving the lifestyle that I wanted at the time. So I transitioned into teaching makers how to take their own product photos, because as a maker myself and being part of, a lot of maker communities, I saw how much you all struggled. And there were so many photographers out there offering advice, but it was in a professional capacity as far as buying the DSLR, spending a lot of money on your light setup, all of that. And I know that, as a non-photographer, you just want to show how amazing your products are and you don't want to become a professional.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I first noticed about Kristina, and her YouTube channel is linked down below if you expand out the video description. But one thing that I really love about Kristina is that she kind of discourages the expensive DSLR, where a lot of people are like, no, you need the expensive camera. Where Kristina, she's focusing a lot on the smartphone camera that you likely already have. She did a great blog about 7 smartphone camera tips that I will go ahead and pop into the chat on YouTube. And for those of you who are watching on Facebook, just go to erank.com/blog. It's right there for you. But Kristina, do you want to answer those early bird questions that we received?
Yeah, I want to add to what you just said too, though. As far as, upgrade, like a camera is just a tool. Okay. Like it's a tool that helps you get the job done. And there are certain tools that we need for specific things. So as a maker, taking product photos for your online shop, the smartphone camera you already have is 100% the camera that you need. And I never recommend upgrading unless you have reached limitations with it. And I just want to be clear that not knowing how to use it is not the limitation I'm talking about. The limitation is you've done everything you can, you've learned how to get the most from it, and you still just aren't seeing the results. There are, a few scenarios where that can be the case, but very, very few and far from.
Yeah. If you just got your smartphone and you're just snapping photos with it and you've never gone in and played with the settings, you likely don't know everything that there is to know about your camera, which that's kind of where I was. I didn't. Mark had to show me. He's like, there's other settings to this thing. I'm like, no, I had no idea.
Smartphones are so good now. The cameras on them is amazing.
They're almost too good. Like I have the new 15 Pro and I only upgrade about every 2 years. And they're getting to a point where they almost seem overly processed to me. So I'm curious to see the direction it's gonna go in, especially with the newer models coming out. But they are rivaling DSLRs for sure.
Diana in the Facebook group, she'd asked, I have little natural light in and around my house. I have to use a light box, but all my photos come out dark and washed out. What's the best way to diffuse the harsh light and get good, bright, crisp photos? I sell jewelry supplies, so I have the problem, especially with clear and shiny items. And that was kind of, I remember when I sold jewelry, I had that problem a lot too, where I just wasn't getting good. It's like they were lit, but the contrast almost looked like it was cranked up when I was looking at those photos.
And mainly that is because of the reflectiveness. So looking at your comment, you talked about dark, but yet washed out. So this can be a combination. So there's a lot of different light boxes on the market, and I'll be real transparent with you. I actually do not recommend any of them. So typically a light box is going to have a really small light source, whether it's an LED strip, maybe it's a ring in the center top. Sometimes the LED strip's just on one side. And the whole component of why it's supposed to work is that internal, all that white, it's going to let that light bounce around everywhere and create this like reflection overall. Problem is tiny light sources create hard to find shadows. So when your light source isn't larger than your product and setup, and distance plays a factor too, you are going to experience those hard defined shadows. On top of that, you are going to, if you're, say you only have an LED strip at the top, you're going to have higher intensity of light on the front of your product versus that reflective light that's on the sides and the back. So then you're going to start to see some of this uneven light where you're going to have, specular parts, especially with jewelry. Jewelry is going to be one of the most challenging to photograph in a light box like that because it's highly reflective. So depending on the size of the light box, which more than likely most makers are going to purchase a light box based on the size of their product. One of the biggest misconceptions there is these highly reflective products actually need a very large surface area to avoid kind of that high intensity of light or that direct light hitting your product. So one thing that you can try is there is this clear plastic poster board and it's sold at Michael's. And it's a couple dollars a sheet, not a lot of money, inexpensive solution. You can try, depending on where your lights are located, you can try to almost kind of like hang this clear plastic poster board and give some distance between the actual LEDs and the poster board so that you can create a larger appearance of light. And what that will do is it'll reduce the intensity and it will diffuse the light, making that little LED larger perception wise, and will soften the shadows as well.
Yeah, it's like vellum, right? It's like vellum paper.
It's I actually have some. I should have grabbed it. It's just like it's transparent, so it's kind of clear looking. Vellum, yeah, you could probably use that as well. I think I have a little pack of that. I've never personally used it, but I've bought it to check out.
Right.
See if because that has transparency to it, right?
Yes, vellum is mostly transparent. It is an animal product, though, for all of our vegans who aren't aware. I've heard that. I've heard that it's got animal products in it. But if you don't care about that, that might be something.
Yeah, the plastic poster board is found like in the poster board section. But yeah, vellum, try that too, especially if you have smaller. I mean, the poster board can be cut down, but
right.
Anything that's has tissue paper as well, you can try that. Anything that parchment paper. That's another one. Anything that has a little transparency that'll let the light pass through.
Yeah, parchment paper. Most people probably already have that laying around their house somewhere. So,
yeah,
and one other thing that I did want to mention is a lot of people will say that their smartphone photos look dark. I want to challenge you on increasing that exposure prior to shooting because smartphones, especially even with DSLR cameras, they're always going to underexpose the photo. And I'm not going to get into the technical side of that, but it's just a common thing. So a lot of times when we tap that screen and we set focus, the image is going to kind of look dark. play with your little sunshine, your exposure settings, and see if that helps.
Yeah. We've got one more from the group from Sharon. And then for everybody, I know you guys have submitted several questions in the chat. I promise we're not ignoring you. But Sharon had said, most of my pics turn out dingy looking even after editing. What can I do to make them brighter and pop? They're not quite as bad as they look in the screenshot from Etsy that she took. And when I'm popping open, I mean, honestly, her photos don't look terrible. The contrast is just very low.
Yeah, they're fine. And that's a screenshot of Etsy put up on Facebook.
Yeah.
So it's got a double layer of messing about with.
I like how you said that, messing about. I mean, as far as quality, like you said, even just taking that screenshot from Etsy, it looks like the quality's there. I will say that kind of the same concept with jewelry. We're looking at some high intense light here. We've got the hard to find shadows. We've got, where we can see the presence of more light on one side than the other. I'm looking at the image. Sorry. That's why I'm looking off the screen. So I highly recommend diffusing this light a little bit, depending on what the light source actually is. When Starla mentioned contrast, there's not a lot of contrast in the sense of the skin color is very similar to the product. And that's going to kind of make the image look a little flat versus your product actually popping on screen. So I'd be curious to see, and this is kind of where we want to play with those thumbnails. Maybe, using the mannequin isn't the best option for that first thumbnail when they click in. Like maybe that's not the best attention grabbing photo as they're going through search. It's a great photo to show what it would look like on, a neck, that kind of thing, the sizing, but that might be better as one of your other 9 photos. Something with a little more contrast to really bring out the detail of the chains, all of that might be something better for our first thumbnail. So I'd be curious to see, if you kind of tested that a little bit to see if you got a better, click rate, any of that kind of stuff, just from it having a little more contrast. A lot of times when I hear dingy, and I'm not seeing this with your photos necessarily, but if anybody ever feels like their photos look dingy or they kind of have like this haze over them, clean your lens. Smartphones are getting better. I will say the past 2 years, I've noticed that dirty lenses aren't as apparent. Whereas we used to be able, a couple of years ago, we could literally like tap our fingers on the lens and take a photo and it would be like a cloud over it. There's some kind of technology. I've researched it and haven't figured it out, but there's some kind of technology where they're able to kind of remove that a little bit, but still, it's still going to create issues for you. So if you're seeing a dingy look, start there. But a lot of times it all comes back to light, you guys.
Yeah. We're about to pop back to our YouTube and live Facebook comments. But before we do, since we're on that topic of light, what I would recommend to those of you who really feel like you're struggling to nail this down, Kristina right now has it's only open until Sunday night, right? For registration. Yep. Yeah. She's got a program called Light and it's only $37. I actually took it last year. I've been an Etsy seller since 2012. And I think my photos look pretty darn good, but I was spending about 10 minutes per photo editing. Well, imagine when you're launching 30 products, 10 photos per product, how much time that takes. And I remember I would have to plan a whole week just to edit photos. Where now, after, taking this 5-day challenge of Kristina's, I'm able to set up my shoot with my lighting circumstances already in mind and just bam, 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 run through all of those photos without having to also take them into an editor and sit and edit them. So I'll go ahead and pop that link if you guys are interested in looking at that in the chat. Kristina, is there anything that you wanted to share about Light?
So like Starla said, it's a 5-day challenge and it builds upon itself. So on day 1, we look at your location. So where are you looking to shoot your product photos? Because a lot of times we don't consider the best place in our home. And the great thing about light is constantly changing, and we all have different light available to us. There's so many things that influence our light potential, whether that's houses next to us, whether that's, are we at an east, west, south facing window? So location is critical. And honestly, there's certain times where you may want to use different locations within your house, depending on the time of day, the weather, all of that. So on day one, we really look at narrowing down the best spaces in your own home. And then from there, we build each day. So I can only imagine that you have gone and you've created the setup, you take it to the window or you put it somewhere in your house. And one time you have maybe some really harsh light where it's like, you have this high contrast of light to dark and you have no idea what to do. And then another time, maybe it's raining outside and you're not seeing that high contrast, but now you feel like you don't have enough light. It's like every time you go to shoot, you're facing new challenges. So what happens is each day we tackle a specific problem and I give you multiple solutions for that. I call them cures. So we're diagnosing the light and then I'm giving you cures so that anytime you go to shoot, not just next week, you can look at your handbook and you can say, okay, this is the problem I'm experiencing. How can I fix it? And you have multiple ways to try to fix it. So by the end of the week, you should have perfect light setup for your specific space and product.
Yeah, it's a forever thing. That's what I like about it, is that once you know it, I'm not having to, go back and like reread the handbook. Now I know, and it's something that you can replicate forever. Even if you decide to sell something different in a few years, you just know it. It becomes a part of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just by taking pictures is a great way. That's what for me, just going out every day and taking 20 pictures on my phone, not necessarily product pictures, but how does it look if I'm at this angle? This is a pretty flower. What happens if I get down here and stuff? And it's just, once you get into it, it's so cool. And then you've got all the advice in your head, basically.
Well, and one of the things that we don't really consider is we aren't, as a non-photographer, you aren't necessarily trained to evaluate the light and look for certain things. So I've heard a lot of students say like, wow, I didn't even like recognize that in my photo or recognize that as being a potential problem. So that too, I'm pointing things out. We're looking at issues that can potentially, occur, not just with your product. Because that's the thing, is you may have one issue one day and then you go to shoot a week later and you're presented with an entirely different issue. So when you come into a group like Light, where you get to experience everybody's personal issues, it really opens your mind and expands the potential of problems that could arise for you and how to solve them. It's really fun.
That's so good, because I've so many courses I've seen, and people will say, oh, just set up by a window, put it there and forget it. And I'm like, I'm in Scotland. It's dark for 6 months and it's raining for the other 6 months.
Okay, so on that note, I teach light principles. So it applies to natural light. It applies to artificial light. But again, it's marketed as a natural light challenge because the hope is that you can do that because it's free, right? We don't have to invest in something else in our business. So applies to artificial, natural, and any product. Okay. The light framework can be adapted to any product. And I provide support. So I am live like 3 to 4 hours a day in that group every day next week. And I personally review all the work that everybody submits. So you're getting direct help from me.
We did have a couple, and Sharon, I do see your question as well. But I did want to just real quick, somebody had asked, is there anywhere where they can see reviews of the course? They're on the page that I just popped into the chat a few minutes ago. And then Carla had asked, is this light course the same course included in Janet LeBlanc's Get Legit course?
No, that's the product photography essentials.
Yeah, which is also something that my own students receive if you're a Handmade Alpha Academy student. So, all right, Sharon, I'm sorry it took us a few minutes to get to you. Thank you so much for being patient with us. But she said that she's recently introduced sun catchers to her shop, but find them really difficult to photograph. Any hints would really help. I've seen a lot of different ways to photograph sun catchers on Etsy. I've seen people who put them in windows, but I've also seen them like on the wall with the light shining through them and the rainbows.
So I think, so first place I always go if I'm feeling kind of stuck on how to style or how the product is used in everyday life is to take it to Pinterest. Search different keywords, experiment with the keywords that you're using, just see what comes up and get a little inspo there first as far as the styling side goes. The other thing to keep in mind, something like, you know, sun catchers, or what are the not stain, is it stained glass? What, like, do you put in the windows? Is that all the colorful? Is that right? Stained glass? Is that the right term for it? So the same thing. Like, if you have a product that behaves differently under different lighting scenarios, it's really good to make sure you capture multiple lighting scenarios. So as Starla said, hanging it in the window, maybe we display it in, I'm trying to even think of, like, I think I'm lost on what a sun catcher is. I'm thinking of a dream catcher.
Yeah, like little crystals and prisms.
Okay, yeah, so that's going to very much interact differently with the light. So you just want to create a couple different lighting scenarios. Thing to keep in mind is you have 10 opportunities on Etsy to share the most important information about your product, okay? And a lot of times makers just snap photos and they aren't necessarily intentional about the photos that they're creating. We want to be intentional. And every photo we take, we want to communicate something very specific. So a lot of times I have makers that come to me and say, I have this beautiful product. It has this amazing sparkle, detail, whatever it is. And they want to capture it in every single photo. Well, if you have a product like that, you know how hard it is to capture that detail and actually have the overall photo look, you know, overly good. Because you have to have a very specific type of light to capture that detail. And typically that high intensity light just doesn't serve well in the photo overall. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have a photo that shows that detail, another photo that potentially, you know, just shows the product in use, everyday use, where the whole image looks great and wonderful. Each photo is going to look different and you're going to be communicating something different in each photo. And that's important to remember.
And that's a place for video as well. Like, remember, we've got videos.
You can show the
spark. If you aren't using videos, you should be.
Especially for a product like that, where you need to be able to see the sparkles. That's like before light. Well, I had already taken light, but then I guess I just like wasn't thinking about it when I first shot the photos of my clear ornaments. I had them as flat lays, and you could see I was using a wood slice, and the ornament was clear over a wood slice, just kind of laying, and the listings were just completely being ignored. And then I thought about it. I'm like, these are clear. You can see everything through them, and you can see everything above them being reflected in them. So I had my husband like balance it on a little, like, you know, Christmassy snowy branch, and I had everything blurred in the background so that you could actually, you know, see through the item. And it was a more realistic portrayal of what this item is going to look like hanging on somebody's tree.
Especially when light interacts with the product, like we talked about with crystals, or crystals is a big one. Anything glass. A lot of times we want to try to achieve like a backlighting concept to really bring out the entire detail of the product. And that can be a more challenging scenario to try to not only style, but get light behind the product and make it actually look good.
Yeah. Joanna said, do you feel like it's worth it to upgrade from an iPhone 11 to a newer iPhone purely based on photo quality?
Do you have an iPhone 11 or an 11 Pro? So there is definitely going to be a huge difference between just the regular models the two lower models versus the Pro and the Pro Max. Anytime you upgrade your smartphone, I 100% recommend getting the Pro model, or, you know, equivalent with Android, because the cameras are typically better. And that's where that core focus comes in. Like typically those Pro models have a high focus on a better camera. So I'll be fully transparent. I miss my 11 Pro Max. Like I upgrade about every 2 years. I've had the 13 Pro and the 15 Pro I'm on now. And like I said, there's just this twinge of over processing where everything just is a little saturated, especially when you increase your exposure. I'd say 2 to 3 years, 4 years max, unless there's something that significantly comes out. But I actually just did a reel today and posted it to my Instagram where I took a photo with this iPhone 5C. And I show you how important light is, how the smartphone camera doesn't matter. Light's the most important. So go check that out. And you'll see that if you learn how to get the most from your camera, you have a good light setup, there's no reason to upgrade.
I'll go track down that.
Mine aren't, it's not the great photos that I want Kristina to look at, but some of my best-selling listings on Etsy, the photographs were taken in 2010. Mm-hmm. I can't, it wasn't a phone, it was a camera, but it wasn't a great camera. So
no, yeah. There's so many other things that contribute to that overall end quality. So it's just important to remember that your camera is just a tool. Learn that tool. Make sure that you know how to use it properly and get the most from it. And then, you know, it's hard to say for your personal, you know, scenario that's coming into play. But yes, there are times where you may need to, you know, use a better camera, or I quote that because everybody always says that, right? If you want better photos, you gotta have a professional camera. So, I mean, sometimes there's going to be limitations, but that's going to be on a case-to-case basis. So as a blanket statement, you should be fine with a phone that's a few years old.
I went ahead and popped Kristina's Instagram. If you guys, it's a great place to also see her photography. We're talking about, you know, all of this, and it's a very visual topic, and you guys don't get the glory of having lots of visuals, but definitely check her out. And her YouTube channel has tons of tutorials and videos that you can check out, and that is linked in the video description. For those of you on Facebook, I'll go ahead and pop that link for you here in just a moment, but it's by Kristina Nicole on all platforms. Maureen had asked a question, and this is the exact thing that happened to me. So I definitely feel this one. She said, my home does not lend itself to great natural light, lots of trees outside and blocking light, and hard to find a window that I can set a table up in front of because of other things in the way, that's exactly what my issue was. And I sat on the floor in front of my storm door with all my stuff all around me.
Yeah, so this may be an unpopular opinion, and I say it with the most love, is a lot of times we make excuses when it's things that we don't want to tackle because we either get frustrated with it or we don't, you know, enjoy it or any of that. But you have to keep in mind that your goal, if you're here, is to grow your business, right? You want to make more sales, and a huge component of making more sales is going to be better product photos for all the reasons we talked about when everybody first got on. So you have to really ask yourself those hard questions. Can I create a space for this, whether I set it up or take it down? One of the biggest grievances I get is I don't have a dedicated space. Y'all, I work in an unfinished basement, and every single week I bring everything upstairs, put it in my living room, dining room. I do my shoots, I record my YouTube video, and I bring it all back down. So sometimes we have to do the hard things to get the results that we want. So I think that's the first thing, is to kind of ask yourself that question. The other thing I'm going to kind of challenge is, even when it's raining outside, I still get great results from my smartphone. And even these newer smartphones, they have this cool little tool, iPhone specific. I'm sure other cameras have the same thing, but I'm an iPhone expert. Night mode. So if you have your camera on a tripod and you're using a remote shutter, which I got, you can use little headphones. You can use a little guy like this, where you just capture the photo remotely without touching your phone. You can turn on the night mode option, and basically what it does is it does a long exposure, and the results are pretty good. So a lot of times we don't feel like we have enough light, but really that just comes down to either A, not understanding how to gain more light, or how to properly use the tools that we have. So in Light, as I mentioned on day one, we will work to find the best location in your home. Okay. And then even on day 3, we talk more about kind of boxing in your setup. If you're still struggling to get enough light, if you're still having poor results. And then of course there are other options. Artificial light, you can get an inexpensive setup for about $100. And then the DSLR option, if you already have one, that's just, tucked under your bed or something, because a lot of us do. They do function better under low light scenarios. So I will pull my DSLR out if if it's like actually storming. I can get pretty good light still if it's raining, but if it's storming or it's later in the evening, but start playing around with just different areas in your house. I mean, you'd be surprised that with the right knowledge, you can really do a lot of cool things.
Yeah, and sometimes the pictures come out under the light you weren't expecting. You get some cool pictures, because I got some of my bookmark pictures. It was dark, I couldn't do anything, but just the way the light worked made it look like it was in a kind of dingy old library, which was perfect.
Yeah, it had that dark academia look, so it worked to your advantage. And that bookmark did very well, didn't it?
Bestseller for a couple of years now.
Yeah. So you never know. Just play with new things. I've got my DSLR, but when it comes to close-up product photography, my favorite go-to is my Nikon Coolpix L820. As old as that camera is, I've been using it for over 10 years, and it still takes phenomenal photos. It's quite affordable, and it's a point and click, very minimal. What, do you have that one?
I'm trying to remember which one it is.
That appears to be the exact same one that I have. And I mean, it's an older camera, but again, like Kristina says, it's less about the camera that you're using and more about the lighting scenario that you're choosing to use. Somebody had said my camera is supposedly really great. Hawaii Pete.
Oh yeah. Hawaii. Oh, yeah, I don't know how to say that.
Hawaii.
Yeah. But I still managed to take exceptionally tall pics with it.
That is a good camera. That's what I had before, and I missed because I upgraded, and it's not as good now. So.
Yeah, I think that it would be.
I was gonna say it's really good, but it was really good for taking pictures on the beach with my dogs. It wasn't really great. It wasn't any better than anything else for my product pictures.
Well, and that's a good point too. With even you go out and you buy the smartphone that's supposed to be the best, right? Like I don't go off of that. I'm an Apple user. I've always been an Apple user. I transitioned to Android once. I hated the interface, and I just can't do it. So a lot of times people will come to me and say, "Hey, I'm looking to upgrade my phone. Which one do you think I should get? Which one has the best camera?" Honestly, it's going to come down to the interface that you are used to and you enjoy. Because if you go to buy a DSLR camera, having to in turn then learn an entire new interface or learn an entirely new tool, yes, our DSLR camera is going to take better photos overall. They have better technology. Yes, but the thing is you may not be able to because you don't know how to use it. So not only is it this high price point, you've got this huge learning curve. So it's just something to consider. Like not necessarily, they're all the smartphones on the market now are great. Like as far as your top models, like the Hawaii and the the Galaxies, the Notes, the Apple iPhone. You can't go wrong with them.
And see, before you buy a DSLR, which you don't need, there's apps you can put on your phone that you can practice using all the fancy things. It's not as good as a DSLR, but it learns what your dials are going to do. Because I know so many people that have the great camera and they just leave it in A mode. They don't know what anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll tell you right now, that's just like shooting with your smartphone. Like the camera is guessing for you. So yeah, if you're not gonna learn, which the great thing with that too is even like inside my course, the Maker's Method, like we go over DSLR cameras. I teach you how to manually set exposure. But DSLRs can be intimidating because they have all these buttons and all these settings. And honestly, we don't use half of them. More than half of them we don't use. So it's also too knowing what matters and what doesn't. And that can be the case for any tool you're using. What's relevant to you?
It reminds me of when my grandma was still alive. She had the remote with like 500 buttons, and my mom just put tape over everything but volume up, volume down, channel up, channel down, because she's like, you don't need any of these.
You're gonna mess something up.
Right.
Yeah. We had a thing when we were mountain biking, and we called it All the Gear But No Idea, which is just literally people would rock up with these bikes, more expensive than my car, and I'd be there on my 200 quid little thing just bumming it down a hill going, yeah, if you haven't reached, like you said at the start, if you haven't reached the limit of what you're using, and I bet most of us haven't even reached the limit of our smartphones. So
and don't let anybody intimidate you into thinking that you have to have, because you know how like our industry can do this. If you don't have this, well, then you're not a professional. You're not legit. You're not an expert. Don't let anybody tell you that you have to have something to, be legitimate, because that's not the case at all.
Yeah. Joanne had said, can I send a photo somewhere to get specific advice on improving it? Unfortunately, we don't have any ways to look at them all together. I know that Kristina does that in the light challenge.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't have a capability to view them live because we can only see your words in the chat. Carla had said, my photos are admittedly not good, but I still make good sales. Hopefully after taking your course, sales will be amazing. I just purchased backdrops and light reflectors from Amazon. I know you have some cool things sitting beside you, Kristina.
Yes. So for anybody that wants to improve their light, I talk a lot about a 5-in-1. I think that's a bigger one. And this right here is a 5-in-1. You can buy them on Amazon. They come in all kinds of sizes. So my best recommendation to you is you want it to be bigger than your actual setup. Okay. Actually, maybe this one's a little bigger than I thought it was. Okay. So it comes like this. We have some gold reflection here, which I don't typically recommend for product because it will cast a warm reflection. White is going to be more of a softer reflection, and this is my go-to. But also as a reflection option, white foam board is your cheapest and best option there. This is the beautiful diffuser, and you'll notice that it's transparent. So if you're using natural light, or if you have a light source that's smaller than your setup, you absolutely 100% need one of these, because it will not only soften your light, so it's going to reduce the intensity of your light, but it's also going to make the appearance of your light larger, which is going to soften your shadows. So this is probably, and a couple substitutes for this. If you don't have the budget to buy something like this, I think the largest one I have, it's like 47 inches. It was about $50. And these tend to range, depending on your size, from about $20 to $50. Tissue paper, I like it because they're foldable too. Parchment paper, we talked about this earlier. Vellum, clear plastic poster board. There's all kinds of inexpensive options you can use for a diffuser.
Yeah,
I need a tutorial in putting them away. I've got I've got like a huge one, and every time I take it out, I cannot put it back.
I have a green screen that's ginormous, and that's the only one I ever have a hard time with. But I do have a huge fear. I just said it next to me. I have a huge fear of it like popping open on its own. I'm gonna put it back in the zipper thing.
Carla said that's the exact 5-in-1 I bought. SK Designer said, I have a pair of earrings with a turquoise greenish blue color. Looks more green in person, but all pictures come out blue. Any tricks to get actual color? I hear that a lot.
Yeah. So there are going to be some specific colors. The thing that you have to understand, and this is going to get kind of technical, but we do have a limitation on the amount of colors that are available in smartphones versus some DSLR cameras. If you are, so there's a couple different options here. You could shoot in RAW, but then you're going to have a pro software that's going to allow you the opportunity to edit in RAW, and you're going to have to learn that process. The other option, it's harder to get great results from a lot of the free apps that are available just because you can't do a ton of selective editing. But one of my favorite apps is Snapseed. And it does have some masking, like brush options where you can selectively apply a certain edit to the photo. So a lot of times we have to go in and we have to just fix color on a specific product. Now, having a proper light setup is going to give you the best possible outcome, but there are just some colors like reds, purples, pinks, depending on what you have in the photo with it. I actually had a student last week who had posted, she had these little tennis ball keychains, and she could get the color right on one of the balls when it was in the photo. But once she put all the balls, like a, variation photo, the pink one was taking on the green ball and it completely altered its color. So we had to go in and adjust the tint. So having a little knowledge of color theory as well, like understanding if you have other items in your photo with it, like the color cast, because light reflects color, there's going to be a little bit of that going on too. But this is a limit. This will be one of those limitations with smartphones or entry-level DSLR cameras, is you're just not going to have that range of colors. And when it goes to process the photo, it's just not going to process it properly. So more than likely, solution is going to be editing, but having a proper light setup to begin with will give you the best outcome.
Yeah, I just want to pull up this because it's pretty much the same, but a Facebook user asking why lavender and purple flowers look blue outside.
The camera, they just can't render them properly because of the limitation on the color range, essentially.
A pinch of cute, Emma asked, any tips on setting up gift sets and gift boxes to photograph them? Most product photography help I see is focused on creating a scene for an individual small item.
So actually just showing you have it on the screen. Awesome. I didn't see that before. Setting up the gift sets and gift boxes to photograph them. That would be where I would have it open. So in that specific image, if the goal, what you're trying to communicate is how it comes in a set, what that's going to look like when the customer actually received it. So more kind of like a packaging type shot. If that's the goal, then you want to package it and style it in a way where it's just going to be pleasing. Sometimes when we package our products, they aren't always pleasing. So we may have to make adjustments. But even letting, like if you put like shreds of paper or anything in it, letting some of that like kind of overflow and fill out and look a little more voluptuous than it would actually being packaged up. I mean, that's the best suggestion I have is I wouldn't add any additional props in that scenario because the focus is to show how it's going to come. You could, now lifestyle photos I know are, difficult for makers sometimes, but even just taking that package and maybe handing it to another person, like you're gifting it to them, or just having, adding a human element in any photo is going to instantly grab people's attention and be higher converting just because humans connect with humans. So even just inserting hands in there, like going to touch one of the items in the box, anything is going to, but this is where I would definitely take it to Pinterest. I'm a very visual person, so these lives can be challenging sometimes, but 100%, if you are having a hard time visualizing an outcome, or even myself, like I can picture something in my head, but I want to see it brought to life on the screen or in person so that I can really get like, yes, that's what I want, right? So take it to Pinterest. Put in your type of product, gift wrapping, box ideas, any of that, and just get some inspiration.
Yeah, you were just, as you were saying that, you were making me think of the the product photography like people do for McDonald's burgers or things, where they've got like
So
bits of
precise.
cardboard between everything to prop it up so it looks it looks like how you imagine a burger, not like how a burger actually looks. So
Exactly.
with your photography, just your boxes fluff it all up a little bit, basically.
Yep. And that's very true. Like when you do like pancakes or you do certain, I'm not a food photographer, but I dabble a little bit in just like learning about it. You add hidden layers between to fluff essentially. So yeah, make it look visually appealing. Make it look like it's full and have texture. Like I said, the paper shreds, like adding texture will add visual interest. There's so many different ways to add visual interest.
Capture it like the ultimate unboxing experience that,
Mhm.
you know, if that person was opening the box, you know, the tissue paper or the little shreds would be kind of spilling out, but you have the
Mhm.
ability to stage it like Pam said, like the magic burger that looks way better than your actual burger. You have the ability to make it look like the best possible unboxing.
Have fun with it. Like
Yeah.
I seriously hate that everybody's just like, I cannot stand product photography, because here's the thing, y'all. You created this product with somebody in mind. You had a vision for it. You had this idea, right? Like bring that idea to life. Like it's the greatest thing ever.
Exactly. I'm going in my head now. I'm going like, can you get fishing wire and hang bits of tissue paper that it's
Mhm.
exploding or stuff, just to have fun.
Gail over on Facebook said, I've taken one of Kristina's courses and she's an amazing instructor and coach. I
Oh,
do
thank
flat
you.
shoots, and her suggestion of scrapbooking pages has saved me a lot of grief. I've been on a bit of a hiatus, but am excited to get back into redoing many photos. I love her tips. My biggest struggle is shooting a flat black flannel with a bit of color without the colors disappearing. Like a flannel blanket? Or are you in the UK where you call washcloths flannels?
So with that, you said black. So yeah, depending on how much black there is, black is actually an absorber. So black is going to absorb light, it's going to absorb color. So I'm guessing you're stating that the colors aren't as vibrant, maybe because they're being washed out a little bit from the black. If that's the case, look at adjusting your saturation in editing. Look to increase that saturation just to make the colors a little bit more vibrant. See if that does the trick for you. But overall, don't bring it up too high. You don't want them to like look overly processed, overly done. But just kind of move them until you get kind of that back to that true to color, because that's probably, I'm assuming, kind of flat, dull looking is what we're experiencing here. Saturation will help.
There's color in corporate, like small splashes of color, and it's making the blacks, I think, you know, still look black without losing those pops of color.
The pops of color are what are being lost. I'm sorry, I'm confused.
No, I don't think that she went into much detail there.
Oh,
My biggest struggle is shooting a flat black flannel with a bit of color without the colors disappearing.
Yeah. I mean, disappearing is a pretty hard word. Like, I don't know if I've ever experienced color actually disappear, but if it looks very dull or washed out, try increasing the saturation and editing.
Yeah.
Or upping the contrast as well. You can play with contrast a little bit.
Patricia had said, I sell laser cut sun catchers. There's another one. The ones that have so much transparency, it's hard to capture the essence of the background image. This might be a good time to talk about like background blurring.
These are sun catchers.
It's hard to capture the essence of the background.
I'm a little confused by what she means with that.
Does your product have like a picture in the transparency, or are you talking about?
Yeah, the background of the image or the background of the product?
Feel free to let us know. We can come back to that one after she gives us a little more detail. Well, in the meantime, we'll go ahead and bump to Carla's, sorry, Carla, and then Patricia, if you want to give us some more details, we'll get back to you. Carla said, I sell notebooks and books. Any tips for me to photograph them? I have collections that are more neutral, nude, matte tones, and the lack of color makes it so hard to get them to pop. Even dark backgrounds don't help. Since they're neutral tones and she's struggling to get them to pop.
Okay. So this is all going to be kind of a process of when you decide how you're going to shoot your photos, you have to not only incorporate your branding into it, keep your branding in mind, you have to think about the ideal customer that's going to be looking for your product and purchasing it. So there's a lot of ways that you can actually grab attention, whether that's in search or on social. So contrast is a huge component of that. And contrast can be in color, it can be in texture, it can be in focus. So we blur our backgrounds a lot of time when we have props and additional elements so that we can really make our product pop, stand out, and be the center of attention. So when it comes to notebooks and books, more than likely, I'm going to assume, because you should be, more than likely you're doing these as flat lays, right? Because that's how you're going to use the product. But book's going to sit on the table, maybe a 45-degree angle, depending on your actual setup. But with flat lays, we can't get a lot of blur because we don't have depth. So that contrast idea is kind of out. So you have to look at doing, complementary colors opposite the color wheel. Look at potentially making the texture different. I don't know if your notebooks have texture, but when your background can have texture or not have texture, you can create contrast that way to really kind of make them pop. Another option is actually to do a very monochromatic look, which means that you use similar colors. They're just a variation in tones. That's also very attention grabbing. I don't know if you've ever scrolled through social and saw like a product photo. A lot of commercial product photography, they do these hero images. And not that I don't get a hero image, but like all these geometric and bright colors, like commercial product photography is very different from, I think, handmade at this point. But you'll notice that when they do these monochromatic, like very bright, just similar tone images, they are very attention grabbing in search. So it's really going to depend on your specific brand and your ideal customer, but you want to just think of a way to kind of make your product stand out. Another option is you could elevate that notebook to a certain degree, maybe put it on some kind of riser, and then that would allow you to kind of blur out, maybe if you had like a pen or some little tray of paper clips or, just little props in the area. That would help you could use portrait mode then and help make your product pop a little bit, but not too much. Don't make it look unnatural or anything like that. Hopefully that helps.
It looks like she said that she just takes the pictures of the item with nothing else. Sometimes a book stand. Like Kristina said, think about the target customer that you're aiming for. If they're like a darker product and maybe you're trying to reach a dark academia audience, I mean, that white, plain, very basic background probably isn't going to stand out to somebody who's looking for a more, a moody type. I'm thinking like Edgar Allan Poe sitting at his writing desk type product. I think that maybe your problem, especially if your backgrounds are just very basic, considering some of the types of props that would go hand in hand with a notebook, like Kristina said, maybe a pen off to the side. The last thing you want is for your photos to be boring. So, I mean, if you've got a phenomenal, awesome product that stands on its own, for example, when I made jewelry, I mean, Kristina, you saw my jewelry a few years ago. It was just, there were so many details to the jewelry that it almost looked better just being on a plain white background because it was so detailed. But for a fairly basic product like a notebook where mood, I think, really contributes to the desire to buy, I feel like candles, there's a lot of products like that. The coffee cup that you photographed with the witch's brew, Kristina, that's another type of product that I think it almost needs props to support it.
If your product doesn't have a lot of detail, like a notebook, that is one that is very, unless you have like your own graphics on the front or something like that, typically very neutral, plain, especially since you've mentioned that it's neutral, nude tones. Think about that ideal customer. Like, Starla talked about the academia look, the little darker and moodier. I think like a diary or journaling. I don't know why, but to me, that's a very like old school vintagey. So I could see, even including a doily in the scenario, or using like a dark kind of worn wood type background. And then like Starla mentioned, you've got candles. Like where are they going to be journaling, writing, using the actual product, and what do they tend to have in that area? Are they coffee drinker, tea drinker? Add a little cup, especially with flat lays. Let's get a peek of what kind of drink they have in there. Any prop you add, this is one thing I want to say, because I mentioned adding a pen. Don't just grab a Bic pen out of your counter little thing, okay?
Pretty pen.
Yes, any element you add to your photos needs to be equivalent to the quality. So if you sell a high quality notebook, do not add a Bic pen, because it's going to instantly reduce the perceived value of your product. You always want to put very high-end looking things into your images so that it actually increases the perceived value of your product. So again, take it to Pinterest. Look up notebooks, journals, whatever it is that you're selling. Get some visual there, especially use keywords specific to your audience.
Yeah, if it's new to match, what was popping in my head with a trend that I don't like, but Pinterest, you'll see some ideas, is the beige mom aesthetic. It's awful, but people know how to take pictures that look good against just neutrals.
Yeah, she said Bible study notebooks, planners, etc. Carla, what I would recommend is go to Pinterest. You can do this with anybody or any target audience. For everybody listening, pinpoint your target audience. We'll say Bible study, and then type that keyword and then aesthetic afterwards. And you will find tons of
or vibe.
Yes, vibe or aesthetic. And you will find tons of photos that are already staged. And then you'll get ideas for colors and tones and things that might work with your products, prop ideas. That I do that for everything. I go in and I type aesthetic afterwards.
I'm a photographer and I do it.
Yeah. Lots of good ideas. We're down to like 3 minutes and we've got quite a few. Do you want to, Kristina, if you have maybe 5 extra minutes, we might be able to power through the last ones.
Okay.
Do you guys prefer a speed round?
I'm good. Speed round. Go.
All right. Kat, I believe that this question was pertaining to light, the challenge, not the thing in the sky. I have an iPhone SE. Will that be suitable? Also, I have a slight visual impairment. So will the materials be accessible?
The iPhone SE will be perfectly fine. The actual lessons are just pre-recorded videos. And then I do have I have a workbook for the entire week, and then you get handouts or downloadable sheets every single day. And then the live trainings are just done via Zoom, streamed live into the group. So it's hard to say, because with product photography, it's very visual. Yeah. So you can, obviously you'll be able to hear everything that I'm saying. The guides are going to be in a PDF format. Hopefully that answers your question.
Well, if Kat wants to email you and maybe discuss a little bit further so that she's able to ask the right questions, do you have a good email that she could reach out to you?
Yeah, just support@bykristinanichole.com.
Cool.
And yeah, if you can give me a little more information, then I can ask you some questions too, because I'm happy to accommodate too if I can do anything to help you.
Yeah, and that might help Kristina in the future as well. Maybe that helps her to learn something new. So definitely don't feel bad about reaching out. I'm the same way with Handmade Alpha Academy. I want to know.
I love when my students reach out and say, "Hey, could you maybe create something like this? That'll help me." I'm like, "Yes."
Exactly.
Because I don't know if I don't know.
All right. Patricia had said, I have great light coming in and it seems like I have too much light. Should I not use my south-facing window?
Well, your south-facing window should not be getting direct light at all. So that's a great window to start with. Start with layers of diffusion. So that is anytime you use a layer of diffusion and the light passes through, a little bit of the light is absorbed. So you can continue adding multiple layers. Just be mindful that every layer you add, the shadows will soften a bit. And we want a little bit of a shadow because shadows help create dimension. Okay, so we don't want our products to look like everything's just floating. And it can also make the image look very flat if we don't have like any shadows. So you want a little bit of a shadow. And the second thing to be mindful of is every layer of diffusion you add, you will lose a little bit of light intensity. So we just don't want to lose too much light. But that's where I would start. Just keep doing layers of diffusion. If you have a window that maybe has porch coverage as well, that would be considered kind of like a layer of diffusion as well. So just kind of look for certain things like that.
I would go through and take photos in all locations and then line them up on your computer screen, because how they look on your phone or even on your little camera screen, it's going to be so much different than when you actually blow them up and get them big on your computer.
It is. And make sure that you're also using reflection opposite. Sometimes people don't use reflection and then they have like a higher presence on one side than the other. So if you're not using reflection, make sure you use reflection opposite the light. And then 100%, if you have the flexibility to take photos kind of at the same time of day under the same weather conditions, do what Starla had mentioned, but just understand that like come the next day, that whole slew of photos could look completely different.
Right. Jennifer said, would my white sheer curtains work as a light diffuser?
Yep. So depending on the transparency, I have curtains that I hang in my main space. They are pure white. You do want to make sure that they're going to be a pure white color because light passing through will take on that color that it's going through. And then transparency levels just going to be probably the key component there. Is I can't say yes, they'll work for you or no, they won't, because sometimes really sheer ones are not going to diffuse the light enough and reduce the intensity enough. And then sometimes if they're too thick, they're going to reduce too much and you're not going to have enough light. But yes, 100%. Great option.
This sounds like a really like dumb thing to point out because you probably already know this, but make sure that if it's on like a curtain rod, you straighten that curtain out, because otherwise you're going to get some sections where it's doubled up and the light's not going to pass as much through. And that's going to completely defeat the purpose of trying to achieve the even lighting.
Very great point.
Yeah. Toffee Apple Studio said, if I cut the background out, is a shadow important? So she means, you know, subtracting the background like in Canva. I have a very clean cut photos with plain backgrounds with no shadow. And I believe Toffee Apple Studio, you create guinea pig beds and things, right? You create cute little guinea pig
cute.
So this is really going to depend on the product. I would say probably like 95% of the time, 100%, you're going to want some type of shadow, just because if not, your product's going to look like it's floating. And here's the thing. When your product doesn't, one of my things that I push and I shove down people's, all my students, is realism. Okay. If you're scanning through Etsy or you're scrolling through social, and sometimes it can be attention grabbing to see a photo that doesn't look realistic. But when it comes to actually shopping, that can hinder your conversion, just because if it doesn't look real, they're going to question the quality of the product. They're going to question a lot of things. So realism is really important in your photos, and a shadow is the easiest way, especially if you're doing background removal, you're putting the product photos on white. It's the easiest way to make that image look like it wasn't fabricated. And when the image looks fabricated, like I said, they're going to question the overall experience that they're going to have.
Yeah, if you're cutting them out in Canva now has it's a product something or other. It cuts them out and puts a shadow on. it's not as good as taking a great photo and not needing to cut them out. But I know I've got some old photos that I'd cut out and I haven't got the original photo. So it can
And I have a
help.
great video on my YouTube channel that shows 3 different ways that you can do shadows in Canva, with one in particular being kind of like the right way, because drop shadow option, again, if you're, let's say you have like a turvis and you put on a, like, you know, on white, you have that shadow with the drop shadow that goes all the way down the side of the turvis. Well, that's not realistic in the way that a shadow would function. To see a shadow like that, that turvis would have to be right up against something, right up against the backdrop. So that's kind of what we're talking about there, is you just want the image to look as real as possible. I am mindful of the fact that I'm a professional sitting here saying that, because all of you might be like, well, the average person scrolling isn't going to, like, you know, notice that that doesn't look real. That may be true. They may not understand why the photo doesn't look right, but they still are going to have this feeling, right? Like, do you guys ever pay attention to what stops you in your tracks on social or on Etsy? Start paying attention to that. Why does something grab your attention? Why does that specific photo stand out for you? Start evaluating the way that you react to certain things, because more often than not, we're humans, so it's going to be across the board.
I dare say a guinea pig bed, the thing that would help me the most as someone is knowing that this is for guinea pigs and not for cats, not for dogs, you know, being able to immediately know the size, either by you have piggies, right? Putting one of your own piggies in the bed, or getting a little plush piggy, just something for, so when I'm scrolling quick, I know that, oh, this isn't a big cat bed. It's a small, you know, thing for a small pet.
Yeah,
it shows scale, but it's cute as well. It'll draw your eye, because if someone's looking for guinea pig beds, they probably love guinea pigs. So a cute guinea pig is a good thing.
Now we've got 2 here from Albert. Interesting question. Are there any recommended enhancements product photos need once you've taken them?
So honestly, so, you know, Starla talks about being like the editing queen over here. Like, I don't do much editing. I don't know if that's just my passion for photography. I started with the DSLR camera. I just learned to take photos, you know, from the camera. But even with that said, I always adjust my exposure. So like I've mentioned, cameras will underexpose, but you also want to kind of do that yourself, because especially if you're shooting on a smartphone, you can't see all the detail. And if you increase your exposure so much that you lose detail, like have really bright, like white areas, we call that blowout. You cannot get that data back. Okay. So I always recommend that you slightly underexpose, especially with a smartphone, just so you can, you know, look at it bigger. So increasing your exposure. Sometimes, depending on the light that you're using, depending on the diffusion you're using, you may need to adjust your color temperature a little bit. So if you've ever had a photo that turns out kind of blue or kind of orangey yellow looking, especially under natural light, you're going to want to go into a white balance setting or a temperature setting, and you're going to want to make adjustments there. And then, of course, you're always going to want to crop and resize for whatever platform you're specifically using. So those are across the board edits that I always do.
All right, we've got one more from Carla. She asked, do you have a product photography checklist for us dummies to go through and make sure we're hitting all the right steps?
As far as there's just so many steps.
It's circumstantial. That's the thing.
And then yeah. So that's why I offer so much support, because I inside, you know, my courses, there's a generalization of what you can teach, right? But people's products have very specific issues and nuances. Depending on what type of camera you use, depending on what type of editing software. Like I teach, I think, over 8 or 9 different editing softwares in my program. All of it, you have your own personal workflow. Your light's going to be different. Your camera's going to be different, all of that. As far as an overall checklist, that's a great idea. I do have, like, you know, a smartphone kind of checklist, like how to get the most from your smartphone. I do have that. I have a ton of, YouTube videos on light. That's a resource that I have within my course, but I don't have it as a free opt-in now. So I'll have to think about that one. That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, Carla, I would start. I mean, Kristina's YouTube channel is linked in the video description. Scroll through some of her videos, and because you can kind of start diagnosing things on yourself once you're made aware of a problem that you might not. I mean, we don't know what we're doing wrong if we don't know that the problem exists. And I think that by becoming aware of problems that we didn't know exist, we gain an overall awareness of what we need to do to actually fix those problems. And she's got tons of videos that can help you with these little issues that it doesn't seem like making one little change, like what she said. When you notice something off about a photo when you're shopping, you don't stop and say, oh, that's an ugly photo, I'm not going to buy that. Instead, the brain just passes by it. You don't notice it at all. Your eyes see it, but you pass over it. So it's those incremental little changes that stack up to create a beautiful photo. And until you know exactly what the issues with your photos are, it can be hard to figure that out. But I did go ahead and post Kristina's light challenge link again in the chat. For those who joined us a little late, did you want to give them one last reminder about what it is, when it closes, when it starts, all?
Yeah, so it's a 5-day live challenge that kicks off on Monday, April 15th, and runs through Friday. Each day, what we're doing is we're tackling one very real problem that you face when it comes to taking product photos, whether that's with natural light or artificial light. The same principles will apply. And so each day we're taking one step towards a better setup. And then by Friday, you should have all the tools you need to be able to replicate that setup, no matter when you decide to shoot, where you go, all of that. So you're going to be experiencing different problems every time you go to take product photos. And the little light handbook you get will give you cures for every single problem that you run into. On top of that, you get to participate with me live in the group all week. So you get to post your action steps. I do critiques of your photos. No question, no post goes overlooked. 100%. I am there to support you, help you see results, and light is going to give you the biggest impact for better quality.
Awesome. Yeah. And she said that she has product photography essentials.
Okay. Yep.
Already. She just doesn't have light, but
light is very different from what is in product photography essentials. It's structured different. So where you're going to kind of learn the same principles as you would, like you're going to learn the principles of light, you are taking a very specific action every day in the light challenge that's going to help you tackle in real time something that you are experiencing. Plus the support is just unmatched. Like I said, like you don't get that kind of support with product photography essentials. I am there in the group every single day, critiquing everything that comes through.
Which is why it's a 5-day challenge and not an infinity thing, because Kristina does have a life. Not during light though. She's I don't know how you do it.
I literally posted to my students last night. I'm like, I miss you so much. 2 more weeks and I'll be back.
Yeah,
You'll be all mine again.
I don't know how you can live stream every day. Like that.
It's my favorite. I love it. Love it.
Really.
On
But
Facebook.
Carla, that sounds like something that you can go through this and make your own checklist of the things that are relevant to you.
That's true.
Once you've been through it, because we're all different and we're all going to have different problems to overcome.
We are. I've thought about making like a t-shirt that says clean your lens, turn off your overhead lighting. Like there are like a couple like very real things that we forget to do, but that's one of like the major components is you. And that's how I run my Maker's Method course is we build out your product photography workflow together, because your workflow is going to be completely different from the next person.
Yeah, I think I need the idiot one of make sure the lens cap's off, make sure it's still in focus. Those are yeah.
You know immediately if your lens cap is still on. Gail said, how often do you offer the course? And feel free to correct me. I put in April and again in the fall.
Yeah, so September, October timeframe. So Light will open again for enrollment on September 30th.
Got it. And we did have W. Sheree asked or said, would love to join the class, but the time doesn't work for me. And I know that I would get more out of it if I can participate in the lives. If you can't participate in the lives, you can rewatch the lives because you have access to everything for 30 days and you can download the videos for Light, correct?
100%. You get 30 days access to the actual back end of the course. And then you have the option to either download everything yourself, or I actually give out a Google Drive link at the end too, just to make it easier on everybody. But the lives, so here's the thing. You're either going to love my lives or you're going to hate them because they run about 3 to 4 hours. So what I do, because they run so long, is I timestamp every single person's critique. So there will be replays for every single one. You can come to the lives. You will learn so much by watching every single person's critique because, as I mentioned before, everybody's light's different. Everybody's product's different. You're going to see all kinds of things come up that you would have never expected. And so by watching other people, you're going to know what to do if that ever happens to you and you ever experience it. But if you don't have time for 3 or 4 hours a day, 100%, you just go to the replay. Look at your post because I tag you in the post. I give you a timestamp, and then you go to that time in the live and just look at your critique.
Awesome.
That's the both worlds.
Yeah. And Lisa had said, if I miss one day, is it still worth it to take the class?
Yeah. So the actual, so it does build upon itself. So if you miss a day, I just recommend catching up. But all of the pre-recorded lessons are under, I think one might be like 34 minutes, but most of them are between 12 and 18 minutes.
They're very achievable.
Yes. So and that's why we take it one step every day. Very digestible, very achievable. If you miss a day, just play catch up, and then you can post. You can do both days for your action steps, if that makes sense. Because like I said, it's building. So if you miss, let's say you miss day 2, on day 3, you could watch both lessons and then just do the action steps for day 3, because every day you're going to re-implement day 1, day 2. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I did it in 2 rounds. Yeah. I did 3 and then I did the other one. So I had 2 rounds of having to work through it because my schedule was so busy. But if you have questions, you can always reach out to her in the support group that you'll have access to. So guys, thanks so much for hanging out. Kristina, thanks for answering questions. For those who are watching the replay, I'm going to have Kristina on my channel tomorrow. If you search Starla Moore, if you weren't able to ask questions today, you'll have another opportunity tomorrow. And if you need to reach out to Kristina, if you have any questions specifically for her, what was that email address that they could reach you?
support@bykristinanichole.com.
Yeah, I will go ahead and actually pop that into the chat. And then if you guys are watching the live replay, you should be able to pull the chat. Support@Nicole.com. Okay. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for hanging out. Guys, be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Maybe we can find some more experts to bring on to the eRank channel and share some fun stuff. But we appreciate you, and we will see you all next week.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristina.